Welcome to the ATL Arts Collective, powered by Arts ATL. I'm Kim Drobes here with Lois Reitzes. Hello, Lois.
Hello, Kim.
Welcome to a bonus episode of the podcast, and here is why. On Wednesday, Lois was our guest co-host, and she brought us the story of Niki in the garden. She had a wonderful conversation with Mary Pat Matheson of the Atlanta Botanical Gardens, and we were hoping to get Niki de Saint Phalle's granddaughter to have been part of the conversation. But she lives in France. We couldn't get it together. So instead, Lois scripted a couple of questions for her. We emailed them away, and then Bloum wrote back and recorded her answers. So today we want to give you her insights into the exhibition. And Lois, you asked her 5 distinct questions. The first one was about her grandmother's memoirs. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, Niki de Saint Phalle loved to write. She wrote 2 memoirs. She left behind writings, letters, poems, books, and sketches within these books and diaries that were reflecting on her life and thoughts. So, with an artist who was as eloquent with words, I was curious to ask Bloum, the artist's granddaughter, how Niki de Saint Phalle's artwork conveys aspects of her life beyond the writings.
Well, I think there's a difference between all the writings that she's done and the artwork. The writing was very personal and intimate, sometimes in forms of diaries, sometimes in form of poetry, sometimes with the idea of it being published ultimately. So there was a lot of editing going on there. As far as in her art, like in the graphics or in the sculptures, I think Niki was very instinctive. So sometimes there are aspects that are sort of storytelling where people find it that it's a personal or at least they believe it's personal and intimate. But that's the magic of artists. Sometimes they tell you truth, sometimes they tell you a story, and sometimes it's all mingled together, or weaved together is more the proper term.
All right. One thing that I know you noted was how central feminism was to Niki's work. When you wrote your question to Bloum, what were you looking to find from her? What did you ask her?
I asked how Niki de Saint Phalle's artwork conveys the various roles of women in society. Niki de Saint Phalle was born in 1930. She really hit her stride around 1960. And, this was relatively early for what we know as feminism catching on fire in the last quarter of the 20th century.
So I think feminism was central to whom she was, not necessarily to her creativity. She was a woman, and as she said herself, that's the perspective she could give as one of a woman. At a special time with special restrictions from society. The work that she's done, I think, often is seen as whimsical. I see it more as seductive, but sort of aggressive. So all these nanas, for example, that she's famous for me, they're an army of women who are coming to take over the world with different tools than weapons, with charm, with joy, with dance, with power, with creativity, with diversity of shape and form and size. And so I think in that sense, her feminism is tricky, like her. She was full of contradictions, as most people and artists, even more so. But I think it's really the nanas and also her sense of scale. So many artworks are monumental, like the one you'll see at the Atlanta Botanical Garden. And for example, in Italy and in different places around the world, she's created monumental works or public spaces. So it's really also a way to be accessible that was very important for her, so that it's not only inside a museum, but also outside and part of life, but also inside your house. So in that sense, she sort of seeps into different areas of life. And that's the role of women in society.
Kedra, I actually started to craft that question by saying Niki was a feminist before the word was coined.
I love that.
Except then I thought, Lois, you better check on that. And I think it was maybe late 18th century, early 19th century when the word first appeared. So, but we think of Ms. Gloria Steinem, or maybe 10 years before we think about Betty Friedan, Simone de Beauvoir, those path-breaking women in the mid-20th century. Well, apparently there was feminism before Ms. Magazine.
I love this. I always learn something when I talk to you, Lois.
Oh.
Let's see. What else did we want to find out from
Ooh.
Bloum? Oh, you asked her a question specifically about the Nana sculptures, right?
Right. These are some examples of how Niki de Saint Phalle honors women throughout her artwork. And the largest is enormous. It lives permanently in Sweden. So I asked Bloum if she would talk about the home, the biggest Nana her grandmother ever made.
So in 1966, under the supervision of Pontus Hultén, who was director of the Moderna Museet in Stockholm before Pompidou or MoCA or so many other places, he invited Niki and Jean Tinguely and Per Olof Utveld, a Swedish artist, to collaborate. And so they built Niki's first monumental work, basically, but it had all these... It was making comments already about consumerism and the direction the world was going in. There was inside there was a machine that was breaking Coca-Cola bottles. There was a milk bar. There was an area for lovers to tell secrets to each other. But in another part of the sculpture, you would hear their secrets. You entered in between the legs. This year is actually the anniversary because it's 1966 and we're in 26. So, voila. Niki, for many years, was fighting off institutions that wanted to recreate this event, but she was really adamant that not only was it a collaboration and you needed everyone involved, but mostly it was at a time and place. And it becomes sort of a nonsense to redo something that was so specific to a time and place. So it's very interesting because that's still a request that happens. But as she told me, you had to be there. And when I said I wasn't born, she said, too bad for you. So that's my take on the Han. I think it's spectacular and interesting in our times to reconsider things that could be done in total freedom, but still in secret.
I know another thing that you were curious about was the fact that Niki had some really famous friends. Would you elaborate on that?
Yeah, two of her closest friends were Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg. They became friends early in their respective careers, and she adored them as artists, as a couple, and as, how can I say, kindred spirits as artists. She was also friends with Clay's Oldenburg. So I wanted to ask Bloum if there was a personal story of her grandmother's that she would share about any of these friendships.
I don't have a special story to say except that she remained close with Rauschenberg over the years. He was really supportive of her when she did the perfume, and she had all these health issues. I think they were both sensitive to inequalities and certain social, civic issues that were important for both of them. I know she adored and admired Jasper John's work also very much so. I mean, all of them. She was very close to Larry Rivers. I think what's interesting, the one thing I will say, it's not about necessarily a personal thing, but there was really a collaboration and friendships at the end of the 60s between New York and Paris, between the artists. The art world was much smaller, and so people knew each other and they supported each other. So one would come to visit one place or the other, New York or Paris. They would all meet, and Niki, being raised in New York, could often translate for many of these friendships. So I'm sure she knew lots of secrets that she kept for herself.
So we might have buried the lead talking to Bloum. She's the head of the Niki de Saint Phalle Charitable Art Foundation. What was it that you were hoping that Bloum could elaborate on about that?
She actually shied away from saying she was the head of the foundation, Kim, although I think she is, but she certainly acknowledges the collaborative aspect of the organization. I wanted her to tell us about the mission of the foundation.
So Niki created two foundations, one in Italy to protect the taro gardens and one in the US for the rest of her oeuvre in general. I am not head of the Niki Charitable Art Foundation. I am one of 3 trustees that she handpicked for various qualities that we each have, which makes us more complete because we have different resources, let's say. She trained me very young to be an expert on her work without me realizing that's what she was doing. But basically, the foundation is the steward to her oeuvre. We collaborate with museums, with researchers, with art historians, with conservators, with curators. The idea is to spread the knowledge as much as we can. Also readdress her place in history and in art history, because for various reasons she was sort of bypassed. She was successful, but I would say misunderstood. Her work was misunderstood because she was a very charismatic person. I think people sort of fell under her spell. But she did do works that resonated at different times, from her Tears, the shooting paintings, which were done during the decolonization. And so there's a lot going on there about freedom, about liberty, about being a woman. And then her nanas, who as I've said earlier, are also seductress, but fierce and strong and there to conquer the world. And then there's all her monumental and public work. Hence this collaboration with the Atlanta Botanical Garden, with whom we had already done a collaboration some 20 years ago. It's very special for us because Niki created her own garden. She loved plants and flowers in particular, and her interest with colors. So it's beautiful to be able to bring Niki in a different setting than the museum. It goes with her public access. She has fountains in different places, monumental works in different places also around the world. And so that's the spirit we try to keep going and share with the public, because it's really what's most important is the public having access to the art. So that's what we try to do. Voila.
Oh, this was such a treat, Lois. You gave 2 different days of yourself to the ATL Arts Collective, and we are so grateful for it.
Well, I'd love to come back sometime if you'd have me.
Yes, please. Let's hang up the mic and schedule that.
Meantime, I will be listening with pleasure.
Thank you, Lois. And thank you for listening to the ATL Arts Collective. You can join us on social at Arts Atlanta and at ATL Arts Collective. Our theme music is K. Michelle Dubois' Hit the Deck from her album Astral Heart, courtesy of Wicked Superb Records. The ATL Arts Collective is part of the Wordplay Collective podcast family. Check out our sister show, In Pieces with Our Land, for conversations with artist Our Land. Thanks again for listening. I'm Kim Drobes, and this is the ATL Arts Collective.